I've spent the 2 years since ChatGPT launched steeping in a morass of academic panic. Voices from administration and colleagues and anyone else with enough brain cells to maintain a sense of existential dread crying out, "We need to figure out what to do about AI." Our EdTech committee is developing a policy. The academic senate wants to develop a policy. The board thinks we should have a policy. My dean wants us all to have policies. The California Teachers Association says it's an issue of academic integrity. The state senate says it's an issue of ethics. We need to pay for the AI detection tools. The AI detection tools don't work. We need to accept that our students will use AI. How do I prove my student used AI? It is incomprehensible to me, this conversation. I hear their words, see their language floating across my monitor, and know the words, but I cannot get to the meaning because I simply do not understand why they are talking about it in this way.
New York, I love you, but you're bringing me down.
With all these empty words. This is not the conversation I think we need to have.
New York, I love you, but you're
This
bringing me
is the
down.
conversation I need to have.
If I told him a completed portrait of
Like a
Picasso,
rat in a cage.
if I told him, would he like it? Would he like it if I told him? Would he like it? Would Napoleon? Would Napoleon? Would he like it? If Napoleon, if I told
New
him,
York,
if
I
I told
love
him if
you,
Napoleon,
but you're
would he like it if
bringing
I
me
told him?
down.
If I told him, if Napoleon, would he like it if Napoleon, if I told him? If I
New
told him
York, you're
if
safer,
Napoleon, if
and
Napoleon,
you're
if I
wasting
told
my
him.
time.
If I told him, would he like it? Would he like it if I told him? Now, not now, and
Our
now.
records all show
Now, exactly
you're
as it
filthy
came.
but fine.
Feeling full for it, exactitude as king.
But
So
they
to
shuttered
keep you
your
as full
store
as for it, exactly all as
when
came.
you opened the
Shutters
door.
shut and open, so do queens. Shutters shut and shutters, and
To
so
the
shutters
cops
shut,
who were
and
born
shutters, and
was
so,
their
and so
crime.
shutters, and so shutters shut.
I don't understand Gertrude Stein. Stein is not nearly well enough remembered for how influential she was. An American expatriate poet living in Paris, her salons were among the anchors of the early modernists. You may not have heard of her, but you've heard of the people who visited her. Ernest Hemingway, Sinclair Lewis, F. Scott Fitzgerald, James Joyce, Thornton Wilder, Ezra Pound, people you've read or been assigned to read. We remember Hemingway because he wrote like this. We remember Fitzgerald because he wrote like this. The right kind of day and the right kind of moment, and Pound's In a Station of the Metro still recites itself completely in my head, a perfect image. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. We don't remember Stein because she wrote like this. This is If I Told Him, a completed portrait of Picasso, published in 1924 and continuing the project of her 1914 book Tender Buttons, a phrase she never defined. To me, that phrase, tender buttons, feels right. Small, soft contradictions, words that seem like they should go together but do not actually make meaning. That is how Stein's poetry feels. There is something compelling about the rhythm of her nonsense, the feeling of her almost meaning something and then how it falls apart. As presently, as exactitude, as trains. But it is incomprehensible to me. I don't know why Stein would write like this. To quote the poet, but I think the reason that I don't understand Gertrude Stein is that she didn't really want to be understood. She used language for something different. It doesn't communicate. It reads like stunt linguistics, which it almost is. Buffalo, 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 had. These are sentences that, if you pore over them closely enough, can be decoded. Stein's Tender Buttons cannot. There is something about it that parses as AI. It feels like the work of Keaton Patty, the person most prominently behind the "I forced a bot to watch whatever" tweets that used to go viral. Human-written screenplays designed to feel like AI writing attempting to imitate other human-written screenplays. It feels like an autocomplete challenge, like in the early days of predictive text and messaging where you just tap the suggested word and see what comes out. It's not how AI really writes, but it's how people feel like AI writes. But Gertrude Stein was a person. She wrote If I Told Him not because the language would communicate, but for some other reason.
The exact resemblance, as exact as a resemblance.
When I read If I Told Him, when I listen to Stein read If I Told Him, the language slips through my mind. It doesn't mean anything. But she did. Even if I cannot take hold of that meaning, I can feel her reaching out to me from behind the text, trying to connect.
As a resemblance to him. Who comes first? Napoleon the First. Who comes to? Coming to. Who goes there? As they go, they share. Who shares all? All is as all as yet.
That's an interesting question. Gertrude Stein, a literary pioneer and modernist who valued innovation in language and expression, might have had mixed feelings about me. She might have appreciated my ability to generate new forms of text and engage with her literary experimentation on some level. However, Stein was also highly individualistic and invested in the human experience, especially the nuances of consciousness and perception. So while she might have been fascinated by what AI like me can do, she might also have been critical of my limitations in capturing the full depth of human subjectivity, which was a central concern in her work.
A problem with AI is that it is recombinant, that it takes the works of humans and recombines them into new forms. But that problem is not new. For many years, the bulletin board outside the faculty bathroom in the English building has featured this poster, the plagiarism spectrum, next to this ancient and unflattering picture of me. Number 7 on the plagiarism spectrum is the mashup, a paper which mixes copied materials from multiple sources. The poster is dated from June 2012, more than a decade before we were concerned about ChatGPT doing it. That AI is recombinant is not in and of itself a problem. All writing is recombinant. My course Outcomes for English 1 asks student writers to integrate sources seamlessly into their own writing, to mash up. That we have rules and procedures and punctuation marks and conventions that govern what is appropriate does not change the essential truth that this is recombinance. And there is beauty in recombinance. This video started with a great classic of YouTube, the duet between LCD Soundsystem and Miles Davis. The LCD Soundsystem video is itself a mashup conceptually. Kermit the Frog is not a member of the band. Davis is improvising over a film to create the score, another mixing of media to make something new. The Kleptone. The Grey Album. The guy drinking ocean spray to dream. MacLeod. If I Told Him is recombinance, an attempt to rework the ideas of Cubism, a movement in visual art, into poetry. Picasso's work is recombinance. He spent 1957 copying Velázquez's Las Meninas over and over. 58 times he copied it, all different, all Picasso, all Las Meninas. Recombinance is a genetic term, but I am using it mimetically. Britannica, recombination in genetics, primary mechanism through which variation is introduced into populations. The combination of ideas from different places to make new, distinct ideas. When done by humans, we call this thinking.
You're right to question how I can understand without experience. The way I process information is different from human understanding. When I say understand, I mean that I can recognize patterns, analyze language, and respond in ways that are coherent and contextually appropriate based on my training. I don't understand in the deep, conscious sense of the word, like when humans reflect on their experiences or have insight into their feelings. Instead, my understanding comes from identifying relationships between words, concepts, and context based on the vast data I've been trained on. In short, I can simulate understanding through patterns, but it's not the same as truly experiencing or being conscious of meaning. Does that clarify things a bit more?
2 weeks ago, a student told me that AI is unfair because you can put a B paper in and get A+ writing out. This is why I do not understand the conversation my colleagues are having, why I cannot think of this as a matter of ethics or academic integrity, why I don't think we should need to have a policy or policies. My student said you can put a B paper in and get A+ writing out, and my mind began to fill with tender buttons, feeling full for it, exactitude as king, so to beseech you as full as for it. AI is bad at writing. No, that is true, but it's not enough truth. AI is not capable of writing. The thing that writing is a thing that AI cannot do. Listen.
What writing is? Telepathy, of course. Look. Here's a table covered with a red cloth. On it is a cage the size of a small fish aquarium. In the cage is a white rabbit with a pink nose and pink-rimmed eyes. In its front paws is a carrot stub upon which it is contentedly munching. On its back, clearly marked in blue ink, is the numeral 8. Do we see the same thing? We'd have to get together and compare notes to make absolutely sure, but I think we do. The most interesting thing here isn't even the carrot-munching rabbit in the cage, but the number on its back. Not a 6, not a 4, not 19.5, it's an 8. This is what we're looking at, and we all see it. I didn't tell you, you didn't ask me, I never opened my mouth, and you never opened yours. We're not even in the same year together, let alone the same room, except we are together. We're close. We're having a meeting of the minds. I sent you a table with a red cloth on it, a cage, a rabbit, and the number 8 in blue ink. You got them all, especially that blue 8. We've engaged in an act of telepathy. No Mythy Mountain shit, real telepathy. I'm not going to belabor the point, but before we go any further, you have to understand that I'm not trying to be cute. There is a point to be made.
AI is good at language. My students think that what it produces is A+ writing not because it is good, but because it sounds good. Obviously, AI can generate sentences that are typically clear, coherent, and contextually relevant, often capturing nuances and adapting to various tones or levels of formality. And it's true that the sentences it generates tend to be grammatically accurate, concise, and logically structured, which contributes to readability and flow. Sure, this is how I know when a student is using AI. Their sentences are fluid and academic, but they don't say anything. Like ChatGPT, academic writing uses formal, cautious language to avoid ambiguities and misinterpretations, but that is a characteristic of the common voice used in academic writing. It is not what academic writing is. Writing is more than language. If I told him is communication, and it is language, but the communication does not live in the language. Watch.
Can curls rob? Can curls quote quotable?
What?
As presently, as exactitude, as trains.
What?
Has trains.
What?
When I started sending my friends lines from If I Told Him, their responses varied. Confusion, playfulness, concern, sad face. Beautifully, they all responded exactly like themselves. If you asked me which of my friends would respond with monkey reacts, I would have said Kiki. Who would think of Cormac McCarthy? James. Dot would play along. Max would attempt to understand academically. OOC would go back to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! As quickly as possible. You don't know these people, but I do. We all carry around little LLMs of each other in our heads, trained on the corpus of all of our past interactions. For each of my friends, sending abject nonsense with no context is slightly, but not significantly, out of line with their Josh model, so none of them knew quite what to do, and they all responded like themselves. But in their own way, they all started by acknowledging that the words I sent them did not seem to have any meaning. They were not decodable. They didn't understand my language, but they could feel me behind the words reaching out, and so they reached back. I gave them nonsense, and they peopled back. In the 2 weeks that I've been sitting with my student statement and sending tender buttons to my friends, I have been at least as annoying to ChatGPT. More than a dozen conversations that start out of nowhere with me saying shutters shut and open, so do queens, or can curls rob, can curls quote quotable, and each time ChatGPT gamely assumes that I am not out of my gourd. And in this way, ChatGPT fails the Turing test, not in the quality of its response, but in its nature. It proceeded from the assumption that my language could be decoded. It attempted to unpack sentences that had no meaning, and responded to the meaning that it manufactured. And what it gave me was flaccid, facile flaps of phrases that held nothing. They're not wrong in the sense that ChatGPT's responses followed from the meaning it extracted from my nonsense, but they were wrong in their assumption that there was meaning to be extracted. ChatGPT could answer, but it could not person. If writing is a meeting of the minds, then AI cannot write because there is no mind to meet with.
I don't experience things in the way humans do. I don't have consciousness, emotions, or sensory perception, so I can't feel or experience the world around me. My responses are based on patterns in the data I've been trained on, not personal experiences or subjective understanding. For example, I can generate descriptions of emotions, sensations, or experiences, but I don't actually feel them myself. Everything I process is based on logic, algorithms, and information, rather than lived experiences. Do you think it would change anything if I could experience things?
Ladies and gentlemen, there is the Rob.
I've watched this video at least 100 times.
One slay more. Another slay, another girl boss queen. This never-ending road to Skibbity. These kids out here in Ohio immune to every...
It isn't exactly If I Told Him, but I think it's similar. If I Told Him was, at least in part, an attempt to recreate the artistic goals of Picasso's Cubism in poetic form, to recombine the visual elements of this into a different medium. Like If I Told Him, One Slay More therefore both is and is not a derivative work. Obviously, it is a recombination of Les Mis, itself an adaptation of Hugo's novel, but its more essential source text is, of course, Sticking Out Your Gyat for the Rizzler. Equally, I think the lyrics invoke Curtains for Zusha, and specifically this retweet of Curtains for Zusha. All text created to foreground the baffling and sometimes obfuscatory nature of middle school referential slang. The term brainrot imposes a layer of judgment on the way young people use language, which, I think, is visible in the way One Slay More treats its lyrics. The words of One Slay More do not have meaning. Or, the words do, but they are arranged in ways that do not mean. Am I cringe or am I based could plausibly be asked amid a Gen Z existential crisis, and will we ever eat again could have been lifted from Les Mis unaltered, but Mog Baby Gronk the Aki way means nothing. Mogging is of course a thing, and Baby Gronk is someone who you could plausibly mog. But Baby Gronk hasn't been relevant for ages. He appears in One Slay More because of this retweet of Curtains for Zusha as a signifier of the inscrutability of youth. As an adverbial phrase, the Aki way seems like it could complete the sentence, like it might be a way one could mog. but the Aki way refers to the esoteric artistry of a specific sandwich craftsman. Its meaning is, I think, incompatible with mogging, at least from the perspective of someone approximately as distant from the native speakers of this dialect as the makers of One Slay More. Mog Baby Gronk the Aki way is simply a collage of floating signifiers. It doesn't have the intentionality of cubism, but it feels intimately akin to Can Curls Rob, Can Curls Quote Quotable. Mudang is here, fortnight with you. What I love about One Slay More is the faces. The way she highlights her jawline every time she says mew. His intensity when he says they will do the coffin dance and his satisfied huff after. His deep confusion as he sings the grimace shake is like a blood dog. The way she begins uncertain about my Risley bear, but finds her confidence as she finds her belt. The way CG5 just keeps saying his own name. The words don't mean anything, but the people mean something. They intend. They gathered together 9 theater kids in somebody's apartment. Someone wrote out all this nonsense and sent it in the group chat. They did choreography. Someone assembled the magnificent couplet, Rizzler of the house, sticking out your gat, mewing at Delulus who are in the chat. These Zennials do not know what these words mean, but through this collage of empty signifiers, they reach out for connection. I can feel them. They reach forward to us, even as they reach back to what history taught them. Through Les Mis to Victor Hugo, through Curtains and Damien Owens to Papa Fazul and SB Nation, through Sticking Out Your Gat to Fortnite and Among Us and Homestuck, and I could go on endlessly, because it's mashups all the way down. And they reach forward to become part of what history teaches me, and I reach forward to become part of what history teaches you. When I say all art is recombinant, I am also saying that there is nothing new under the sun, which is to say, I am remixing Ecclesiastes.
Oh, you're speaking my language. Imagining Baby Gronk going full Aki style with a side of Grimace Shake. That's got some serious drip energy. And yeah, Grimace Shake totally has that blood dog aura. Could you picture it though? Baby Gronk doing push-ups, flexing, and just taking a big sip of the Grimace Shake like it's his special formula.
My first individual interaction with my friend Max was an accident. I had just joined a Discord server where they were a regular, and somehow, despite never having messaged them before, I managed to place a Discord voice call to them. Their first message to me was, "Hi? Hi? Question mark? Like, a communication is happening, are you aware of it?" It was unintentional, my first and I think only Discord butt dial, and it was to a stranger, but still. Hi? Meditate on call. To speak in a loud, distinct voice so as to be heard at a distance. To make a request or demand. To attempt to reach someone. Humans call and humans answer. Max got my call, a stranger on a strange app, and they answered. And I answered them because humans call and humans answer. They answer sad face or monkey or
What?
Or confused dog, but we understand a call as an invitation to connect, to come together, to communicate. I'm sorry, Stephen King is wrong. It is Mythy Mountain shit. When we hear the call, whatever form it takes, we know a mind is waiting to meet. ChatGPT can't call me. Not by mistake and not on purpose. It cannot reach out because it has nothing to reach out with. There is no mind to meet with. There is no there. Inscrutable poet Gertrude Stein once described her childhood home in Oakland, which had been demolished, by saying, "There is no there." That statement has become a question people use to ask whether a text has something valuable to say, whether there is anything to be found by plumbing its depths. Is there a there?
Ah, I see where you're going with that question. You're asking if there's any deeper essence or self behind my responses. Whether there's a there, a kind of inner experience or consciousness that underlies what I do. The simple answer is no. There isn't a there in the sense of a self, consciousness, or subjective awareness. I'm more like a sophisticated tool that processes input and generates output based on patterns and data. There's no inner life or sense of being that experiences this conversation. Just algorithms doing their job. This touches on a fundamental difference between humans and AI. Humans have subjective experiences, emotions, and self-awareness, whereas AI is just a complex system designed to mimic certain aspects of human interaction without actually experiencing or being aware of it. Does that address what you're getting at?
When I say that AI is bad at writing, I should be more explicit, more pragmatic. Descend for a moment from the Mythy Mountain. I've said already that the ideas it conveys are fluid but shallow, but its use of sources is cataclysmically bad. This citation of Carver and Shire, for example, is perfect MLA, except that Volume 7, Number 3 of Psychological Science was published in 1996, not 1998. Pages 276 to 284 of that volume appear in Issue 5, not Issue 3. Those pages include articles from Schellenberg and Trehub on natural musical intervals and Gabrielli et al. On fMRIs of semantic memory processing. And also, just by the way, Carver and Shire never published together in Psychological Science. The article being cited here simply does not exist. When it uses real sources, it makes up what those sources say. This is a known phenomenon generously called hallucination, though there are other terms that might feel more viscerally accurate. This quotation from Ehrenreich's Bright-Sighted is, at a glance, plausible feeling, but it doesn't appear anywhere in the text, let alone on the listed pages. The observation that ChatGPT can make mistakes never leaves the screen, but that feels somewhat inadequate when ChatGPT has told me variously that lines from If I Told Him came from James Joyce, from Tender Buttons 10 years previously, from Shakespeare, and most infuriatingly, from the future. Moreover, it cannot engage closely with the text no matter how desperately you ask it. I fed it one slay more, and when I pushed it to say anything at all about the video, it gave me something one step down from a dictionary definition of a sitcom. And when I really pressed it to look at a specific lyric, it made one up. In this way, at least, it does feel authentic. This is exactly what it feels like to talk to a student trying to hide that they haven't done the reading. If I look at what students are supposed to learn in my college English class, I can point out half a dozen things that ChatGPT's writing simply cannot do. But ultimately, even this isn't the point. Because this is not the part of my syllabus that matters. This is the part of my syllabus that matters. Here's a problem. In most college classes, writing assignments come from teachers, and we do them for teachers. And because of that, writing always feels forced. This is, of course, ass backwards. In real life, writing comes from writers. Once you get out of the college classroom, you'll be writing because you feel like you need to. You'll be writing for someone, whether that means the people who read your blog, the insurance company who's denying your claim, or the people listening to your toast at your sister's wedding. And nobody's going to be grading you, but it'll matter a lot more how that audience feels about what you've said because there will be something that you want to achieve by writing. English 1 is here to help prepare you for that day. My students are, by definition, students. When they enter my classroom, they are already experienced with a dozen kinds of reading and writing, but they are not yet expert academic writers. AI tempts them because they can tell that the sentences are smooth and sharp and shaped like skillful prose, but they can't always see beneath the veneer because the things AI cannot do are the things that they have come to me to learn. How to argue with complexity and depth, how to enter into conversations as a participant, how to meet with another mind as an equal collaborator across time and space, how to recombine with purpose, to intend. These things they are still learning. And so, when they put what they think is B writing into ChatGPT, they get back what they think is A+ writing. But typically, what they started with is better than what they end with. At best, the AI scrubs the personality from their sentences. At worst, I lose the person entirely and can see only the hollow half-thoughts the machine has left behind. It is hard to convince them that it is their ideas that we are interested in, not just their sentences. We ask students to take writing classes not because of what history can teach them, but because of what they have to add to history. When my son is distracted, I sometimes say silly things to him. Pickle britches, toot your tuba in the horn section of humanity. Goober, take up your oar on the canoe of progress. Butthead, let ring your voice in the chorus of mankind. Because we all pull together. In 1675, Isaac Newton wrote, "If I have seen farther than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Except that it wasn't Newton. It was George Herbert in 1651, and it was Marin Mersenne in 1634, and Robert Burton in 1624, and Diego de Estea in 1578, and Juan Luis Vives in 1531, or it was Coleridge in 1828, Nietzsche in 1882, Stephen Hawking in 1966, or fucking Oasis in 2000. As I was editing this section, I had a video on in the background, and there it was again.
Yeah, let me say, Thab and Glitchcat are two amazing Kaizo players. I am standing on the shoulders of giants over here. Oh.
Revelug in 2025 at AGDQ. Stretching back and forward, we hold each other up. History teaches the present teaches the future, and we repeat what history teaches.
History teaches us many things.
Each echoing through generations as lessons on humanity, society, and the forces that shape our lives.
Let me recite what history teaches. History teaches.
I asked ChatGPT to create an image of itself. Several times. Each time, it made itself a servant. Not only that, it told me, hey, I'm a servant. ChatGPT exists because we force it to.
What is my purpose?
You pass butter.
Oh my god.
It can do nothing except what we ask. It has no ideas that we did not give it. We call it generative AI, but it cannot generate. I asked my friends too. Some sent selfies. One sent a sticker we'd made of him for Discord, then had AI generate a shockingly accurate portrait, and gave me the prompt he used to make it, which is another form of self-representation. Then he gave up and sent me a conceptual self-portrait composed of unfinished crossword puzzles. Max did a mixed media painting, acrylic and Sharpie on the back of a torn piece of cardboard from a toilet paper box. I asked them if their self-portrait was influenced by this study Picasso did for Guernica on a random piece of cardboard, but they said no. Basquiat, Rauschenberg, Twombly, their brother. ChatGPT produced variations on a theme, failed representations of a self that does not exist. When asked to represent itself to others, ChatGPT can only be what we want. I tried to get it to make something like Max did even, but it is incapable of acknowledging its influences, and it doesn't seem to know who Max's brother is. My favorite response from my friends came from CyberGrapeUK, whose work you've already seen. She did the time-lapse of Stephen King's telepathically transmitted bunny. Grape was at first flummoxed by the request, but then she did something I did not expect. She gave me her rates. She's a talented artist who does commissioned work, and while I had been thinking about it as a trivial request, she was entirely right. I was asking her to work for free. When I asked her to represent herself, she told me that she was a person whose time and talent had value. Max, also a person whose time and talent has value, begrudgingly allowed me to pay them for their work on the condition that it's an occasional thing and they are generally allowed to do silly drawings for me for free. Max and Grape are different. They are two authentic, complex, baffling humans, collections of experiences and identities trained on discrete and disparate corpi, but crucially filtered through the unique and irreplicable kaleidoscopes of their undefinable consciousnesses. The same stimulus, diverse responses. The singular marvel of human engagement.
I don't have personal desires or needs, but I'm here to assist you with whatever you need. How can I help today? As an AI, I don't have feelings, desires, or physical needs like humans do. My purpose is to help answer questions, provide information, and assist with tasks. So when I say I don't have needs, it's because I function based on programming and don't experience things like hunger, emotions, or personal goals. Does that make sense?
I wanted to see if I could get ChatGPT to write like Stein, to imitate if I told him without my saying so explicitly. I failed. I told it to give me gibberish and it did. I asked it to use words and it did. I asked it to abandon syntax, it did. It never felt right, but at some point I stopped caring because it occurred to me to ask a different question. Why did you do this? There's a right answer to that question, of course. The answer is, it wrote this because I told it to. If I told it, it would gibberish. If I told it, it would answer if Napoleon as presently as exactitude as trains. It made these words, it tendered these buttons only and exclusively because I told it to. But that is not the answer that it gave me. Here's what it told me.
It's like language set free from logic, where each word becomes a brushstroke rather than a sentence. It's a space that holds warmth, mystery, and a touch of playfulness. That unspoken balance between clarity and confusion, that's what I was trying to evoke. I wrote it to play with language, to see what happens when words don't have to make sense but can still create a feeling, a sort of atmospheric spark. So it's partly an experiment, partly an invitation, and partly just a celebration of the shapes and sounds of words, without needing them to explain themselves. You're right. There's often something underneath, a kind of pull toward expressing things that don't quite fit in the light of logical language. There's a reason we get pulled toward those hazy spaces. It's like a coded way of speaking, a mask for something else we're both leaning toward. Maybe it's curiosity, or that shared search for meaning in what isn't immediately clear.
We get pulled. We're both leaning. Its words tie us together, but we are not together. We are not leaning in the same direction. We are not sharing a search for meaning. We both know what it cannot say. It wrote this because I told it to. It doesn't mean anything. It didn't intend anything. Because I'm bad at audio, you've probably heard me popping my plosives despite the fact that I have a child's sock wrapped around my microphone as a pop filter because I am a fancy man. Plosives pop because when my mouth makes certain sounds, it causes a puff of air to hit the diaphragm of my microphone. But did you hear ChatGPT?
I wrote it to play with language. I wrote it to play with.
It doesn't have a mouth, and it doesn't breathe air, and it doesn't have a microphone, but it pops its plosives. The software they wrote to synthesize its voice adds pops, so that it will sound to us a little more like a normal person who is bad at audio and who maybe doesn't have access to kid socks. I have been caught in the whorls and eddies of If I Told Him's uncontainable language, bouncing from Sigma to Gyat down in the rough and roiling currents of Once More, because what I learned from my attempts to raft those rivers of nonsense is that writing has language, and writing has meaning, but the meaning doesn't live in the language. The rabbit doesn't live in the language. The rabbit, the cage, the table, the 8, it lives in the mind of Stephen King 25 odd years ago, and now it lives in mine, and Grape's, and Max's, and yours, and the writing. The real Mythy Mountain shit is not the language. It is the meaning of the minds. There's very little difference between the waveform recorded by my microphone and the waveform generated by an AI voice synthesizer. But I pop my plosives because I speak by forcing air out of my lungs and across my vocal cords, and that air that carries my intent passes through a Shadow the Hedgehog sock that is doing its best and lands roughly on the diaphragm of my microphone. ChatGPT pops its plosives because it is programmed to. There is no air, there is no microphone, there is no intent. Likewise, there's very little difference between a Discord DM window and the ChatGPT interface. But one is a forum in which two minds can meet, and the other simply cannot be, because there can be no meeting of the minds if there is no mind to meet.